Welcome to Hameen Royale. This is Eric Grissom.
And I'm Dan Johnson. Eric and I will be rewatching the iconic Twin Peaks from the pilot through the return and everything in between.
If this is your first time watching, or if you're a longtime fan, you can watch along with us as we dive deep into the strange and wonderful world of Twin Peaks.
We live inside a dream.
Today on Meanwhile, we are talking about the secret diary of Laura Palmer. We've hit the moment when we're getting to, well, let me just say this, Dan. We're going to talk about very heavy things. There's going to be any number of topics, sexual abuse, sexual assault. We're going to get into it. So for anybody that's going to make uncomfortable, or for anyone that hasn't read it, obviously, we're going to be talking about all the details in it. I don't know how else to talk about it without, it's such a harrowing tale that it's going to get dark. With that out of the way, if you're still with us, thank you for staying. Dan, this is The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer. This is written by Jennifer Lynch. Obviously, she's the daughter of David Lynch. We've talked about that. Her mom is also an artist, Peggy Reevey. She's a fantastic artist. Jennifer Lynch would go on to direct many films and a lot of television. Her first film that she wrote and directed was Boxing Helena with Sherilyn Fenn and Julian Sands. I remember when that came out, or the lead up to that coming out, and being so excited and waiting, and there was a whole bunch of legal issues, and at one point, Madonna was going to be in it, and then Kim Basinger, and then there was a whole lawsuit, so it was really rough for her, I think, as a writer-director, particularly just to be compared to your father. I mean, talk about a very long shadow to try to grow in. She's wrote and directed a film Chained, another film Surveillance, as I said, a lot of TV, including the TV show Monsters, which the one season with Jeffrey Dahmer, and the episodes that she directed were by far my favorites. When she wrote The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer, it's credited as seen by. She has said that she sort of became close to Laura Palmer, and this is her accounting of Laura's life, essentially. So it's almost as if Laura dictated this book to her. It was published on September 15th of 1990. It reached number 4 on the New York Times bestseller list on October 28th, 1990. Jennifer Lynch was 22 when she wrote this. She apparently wrote it in 9 days.
Oh my
gosh. And then flew to New York. She wrote it on a very early word processor, like a very early computer, so probably on 5.25-inch discs.
I can imagine. Yep.
Flew to New York, and when she arrived, all the files were gone. So it was completely empty. So she had to completely rewrite the book. So there is a version of The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer that was written in 9 days that no longer exists. So I can't imagine the pressure that would be for someone.
Oh my God.
Apparently there are 2 moments in this book that are from her life. One of them was in the book, there's a dream about her being devoured by rats, or rats are eating her feet, and that's from her life. The other situation she will never tell. So it's a mystery. Yeah, you can figure out what's that's about.
I hope it was her getting a pony, and not some of the other things that are going on in this story.
Could be any number of things. But it's very cool. And the fact that she was 22, she's close enough in age, and it's amazing the type of trauma that she was mining and how it plays.
Yeah.
When she was when she was 12 years old, her dad picked her up from school, and for whatever reason, it came up like he was like, what would be like your ultimate dream, or what would you want? And she told him she always wanted to find someone else's diary walking home from school, and so that she could see if they had the same fears and fantasies that she did, because she wanted to know if she was normal. Fast forward, 10 years, and he approached her and said, hey, you remember when you had that story about wanting to find a diary? How would you like to write The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer? She was one of 3 people that knew the identity of the killer, the other 2 being Mark Frost and David Lynch.
Goodness, I was briefed beforehand, offered the position, accepted it, and then briefed taken basically into a dark room, and David and Mark both looked at each other and said, well, I guess she needs to know. And I was told who the killer was.
You were?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, hold on, folks. You can guess what the next question's going to be.
Yeah, I can't tell you that.
So when she went into this, she knew the solution to this mystery that was plaguing the nation, which is fantastic. You know, during the press tours and stuff, she had said, you know, you can figure it out by reading the diary.
Some of the clues in the diary will become more evident once the series begins again. Some of them stick out like sore thumbs, but the careful reader, I think, will find those clues that are more like gum wrappers under the table, things most might not notice. So Peaks fans, in my opinion, should know who the killer is.
There is a fantastic audiobook that was released in 2015 in which Cheryl Lee reprised her role as Laura Palmer. I highly recommend that. For me, I read this as when it came out, in between seasons 1 and seasons 2. So it's interesting to get like your voice, because if you remember, like when between season 1 and season 2, you don't really hear from Laura. Like she has a handful of lines that you get through a videotape. You get Maddie, but she's a different character. So to hear like what Laura would sound like in my head, in my 15-year-old brain, versus having one of the best performances for an audiobook I think I've ever heard with Cheryl Lee. It is a different experience. I recommend whichever you prefer is fine. I kind of liked reading the book and then hearing it. But you, Dan, you did not read it, but you listened to the audiobook first, correct?
Yeah, that's right. I listened to the audiobook and then I have gone back since and reread a substantial portion of it. That performance is just remarkable for so many reasons. First of all, I mean, to get to hear Laura in this first-person way, it's so intimate. As we'll discuss, it couldn't be any more personal, couldn't be any more interior, from her dreams to her thoughts, her fears, everything. And to hear her performance change as we start with Laura as a 12-year-old on her birthday, all the way up until just before she dies, we just get this range. You know, someone described her as being precocious, and I think that's absolutely true. She's well beyond her years, and you hear that reflected in her voice, and also doing Bob's voice, or her interpretation of Bob's voice as well, which sent shivers down my spine. I have no regrets having listened to that first and then read the book. So I listened to approximately 2-3 hour chunks back to back as I had a trip to go on a car ride. So it was a lot all at once, both directions, especially the second half coming home. I think I talked to you right afterwards. I was like, I'm absolutely shattered and also can't wait to talk about it. It destroyed me. And it's not just because of the story. It is absolutely almost an equal measure the performance of it.
I mean, for me, I think this book is just a masterpiece. I feel like it should be more read and talked about even outside of Twin Peaks for a look into abuse and the manifestations of abuse and how that turns into self-medication and isolation and drug use and eating disorders and the need to control when you're in a situation where you have no control. I just think it's so much better than you expect from a TV show offshoot. Blows my mind.
It could have just been a cash grab, and it absolutely wasn't. It was something that not only gave us more information, but absolutely deepened everything about the show in a way that it didn't have to do that.
And it pulls no punches. It was banned in a couple of places because it is very graphic. It also, I feel like, is a great introduction to Fire Walk with Me. I feel like if you were like me and you watched season 1 and you read the diary and then you watched season 2, there was no real shock to what goes on in Fire Walk with Me. I mean, many people did not like, we'll cover that when we cover the movie, hated that movie. It didn't have any of the joy. It didn't have any of the fun. It wasn't this quirky, it was a tale that it was her story. Like it was just a continuation of this diary. So I feel like if you were one of those people that bought the book and read the book, Fire Walk with Me is a natural progression of that story.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, that's centering this Laura in the story as opposed to everyone else's Laura that's presented in the first and second seasons.
This comes out like between season 1 and season 2. They don't find this, I think episode 3 or 4 or whatever of the second season. When I was a kid and I bought this, you're expecting to read like nervous about meeting Jay tonight and the things that Cooper was going through. And then you realize this is a completely different diary. This is a secret diary, a second diary. But I like that you're being introduced to new characters. You're going to meet some of these people that she meets on Meals on Wheels in season 2. But to have like this connection with Laura that even the characters in the show don't have, it feels like you're being led into this like secret world, which I love. It feels so real and authentic. And I can't speak to sexual abuse personally, but like feelings of not being safe at home. Like there's multiple times where she's at home and she's talking about these horrible things are happening to her and her parents are just a couple of doors down and they're not helping her and she has no one to help. And like, I mean, who can't relate to the feeling of being young and feeling that you're not normal?
Yeah, that's totally right. I think a couple things to pick up on that you had talked about. Amazing to hear that Jennifer Lynch had that fantasy of finding someone else's diary to confirm that she is normal. We see this in the diary as Laura is evolving in the way that she's feeling about things, and her relationships are evolving, and the distance that grows between her and Donna. She also has this fear that she will lose her friends. She would lose the most important things to her if they knew who she really was. And I think this feeling of isolation, there's moments in there, and it's something I want to talk about later as well. It's particularly this feeling about her parents. She has this close relationship with her mother, but that then distances over time. She had a closer relationship with her father that you see reflected later in a Christmas scene where they're dancing together. She's like, this reminds me of how it used to be, but is no longer. That distance as she grows over time is absolutely something that virtually every teen could relate to. It is so beautifully written in that way. So painful and raw and real, but beautifully written.
It is July 22nd, 1984, and I have had such a good day. You were the last gift I opened, and I could hardly wait to come upstairs and start to tell you all about myself and my family. You shall be the one I confide in the most. I promise to tell you everything that happens, everything I feel, everything I desire, and every single thing I think. There are some things I can't tell anyone. I promise to tell these things to you.
Having talked about the general ideas, this just highlights a couple of sections, whether they're themes or events. I know there's so much stuff in here. We could spend 2 or 3 hours easily covering this, but give me the one that's the stuff that connected with you the most.
One, maybe just to start with, it's not maybe the most important thing, but I think it comes back and recurs throughout, and it really struck me as something I didn't expect to see in this book, and that is November 10th, 1985. This is Laura had a dream of 1400 River Road, and feels compelled to go there. She goes riding out there. She'd never been out that way before. She finds an abandoned gas station, and waiting for her there is the log lady, Margaret Lanterman. Laura didn't really knew of her, but didn't ever have a conversation, it seems, with her. But this scene, again, I've said this so many times. One of the things I love about, talking about Twin Peaks or Doctor Who or any of these stories is the mythology, talking about X-Files, whatever. I love the Creature of the Week stuff. I like that, but I really love these connective threads and the thematic things. And this is so connected to the Twin Peaks that I know, connecting it to this new aspect of Twin Peaks that I'd never read the book before. So to bring the log lady of all characters into it, who already has this, we've seen in the first season, dear listeners who've been with us, we've seen a scene with Margaret out in her cabin with the 4 gentlemen on an adventure. And we already know that she's very cryptic. She has more to say. And this is just an extension of that. Not only does she kind of, the log lady Margaret, give Laura some insight into, Laura's trying to recall exactly what she says. She's talking about the owls, and I have some quotes, and we can talk about that specifically. But I think overall, we have this moment of Laura feeling peace, having connected with someone who gives her a sense of reassurance, lets her know or makes her feel that she has a future, that she's going to be loved, and the fact that that feeling stays with her through later in the day, she still feels that sense of peace and contentment. Stands out so much from the rest of the book, because even up to that point, there have been moments of not feeling that, and then later really goes in a different direction. So this absolutely stands out emotionally as something different, connecting with someone and feeling assured in herself that things could go towards the light. It's heartbreaking and wrenching because we know where it ends up going. But I can talk more about the scene. But how did you feel about this?
I would add to this scene because I think this is one of the most important scenes of the whole book.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely. Like you get first off, 1400 River Road. It's an abandoned gas station, which immediately would call to mind if you had seen The Return. Like there's the Dutchman's Lodge. Whether it's the same location or not, it's still fantastic.
It's what I was picturing in my head as I was seeing that, reading it as well, for sure.
But the log lady introducing the idea that things are not what they seem, and owls are sometimes big, owls are sometimes big, that owls can be people. We learn, again, the history of her husband, how he tripped over a root, he died face first in the hot coals. All that stuff is important, cool mythology, but it's the stuff that she talks about that hits hardest, which is that sometimes the woods are a place to learn about things and to be yourself, and the woods are magical and they are this special place. And sometimes the woods are for creatures, these higher beings, whatever they are, that are not for us. And then sometimes people go camping and learn things they shouldn't, which now we're talking about abuse, and my mind goes to like the Boy Scouts and what a wonderful thing it is to go camping with the Boy Scouts, and then the adults that are taking advantage of children in the woods, which is what Bob is doing. Bob is taking her into the woods, and there's multiple references to this, and she herself takes herself to the woods, and there's that scene where she's masturbating under the tree with the owls there, and it's like this, the log lady says sometimes children are prey.
Yes.
And it's such a powerful moment, but like you're saying, she gives her hope. She says that line about like, I dream like other people sometimes, which to me, I don't know how you take that line, but it was, I'm like you in that I am an outsider, but I also can connect with people the way we're connecting. And there's so much joy and hope in Laura. And then the next freaking passage, she's visited by Bob and it's completely destroyed, and she starts doubting herself. And I don't know if the log lady was talking about the right Laura Palmer, but this scene is fantastic. And then you watch that hope get taken away because she can't ever be saved, or she doesn't feel that she can be saved. But it's such a wonderful scene, and all the stuff about the owls, and we're going to get a large owl later on as well, like in another one of her dreams. The idea of dreams, like she's connected to Cooper in that a dream brought her here.
Well, can I... Yeah, I just want to read the part. She says, Laura recounts, she said, I know you're feeling curious about this place and about me. I nodded. A dream told me I was supposed to meet you here so that we could spend some time, she says. I dream like other people sometimes, she said calmly. It just happens. That's such an incredible detail to get in this, because as we've seen with Cooper and his dreams in the season 1, we have Margaret as well. She says when they meet Cooper at the cabin, you're supposed to be here 2 days ago. Like, Margaret is just a character that you can't underestimate how important she is centrally to all this, even though we don't really see her as much as you might expect otherwise. Sorry, just wanted to...
And there is a wonderful bookend to this in Firewalk with Me. The two of them have a beautiful conversation, painful conversation, and it's so great how the two of these work together. Now, if you listen to Jennifer Lynch... I've listened to a number of interviews, and she gives the impression that David Lynch did not read the book. Now, for someone whose father never read anything that he ever wrote either, there's something to that I feel like all children of great people always have to deal with. I want to pretend that he did read it because there's so many connections, whether, that was coming from Bob Engels or not. I like to think of it as him celebrating his daughter and bringing his daughter's work into it, because we're going to see with Troy, horses appearing are not the same horse, but there's plenty of things from this that feed directly into that. business. What was I talking? I don't even remember where I was going before I derailed myself thinking about my dad not reading my books. I don't know. It doesn't matter. I'll talk about mine. So I can't not talk about the diary without talking about Rick, Tim, and Josh. This is such a important moment for Donna because we're going to see Donna's view of this story later in season 2. So look for that to come. But when they go to the book house and they're these young girls and they meet these older Canadian men, way older, in their 20s, these guys are.
Yeah.
You know, these are young girls hanging out with 20-year-olds. You get a little thing, not a big detail. The book house, there's a picture of a James type. You know, she immediately loves it, so you can see sort of where that's going to go. But the reason why this scene stands out is it defines one of her tools to protect herself, which is sex. So this is the first time she's really able to use sex to maintain control. And the idea that she's dictating what the guys are doing, you know, you can come over here and do this, and we can go this far, and this is where it stops. And so much joy that she gets out of it. It's a very positive experience for her. That element of control and power, and she's sort of calling the shots. But it's also the moment that really defines the gap between her and Donna. It all comes from this night. She starts worrying, did I go too far? The two of them don't talk for a while after this, and like that isolation really begins. As a kid, she was talking about sort of sharing fantasies, and Donna sees her in her, like, doing the type of thing that she wants to do, and it really is sort of the beginning of that schism. One line that just resonated very deeply with me is for any kid that snuck out of your house and got too drunk or high or whatever, like that feeling of being a kid when we were home, we were okay. It's like we were home and we were okay. Like that feeling that when you get back into your house and you're made it back safe, and like that's like so authentically kid.
Yeah,
for me, it just rang true.
That's an interesting scene for you to pick, and I totally makes sense why you explained that, and the way that you explained it too. Of she has control, she's using sex as a way to control the situation, and also experiences it in a purely pleasurable way. When from the outside, it's what, 2 14-year-old girls, I think they're at the time, with guys in their 20, 22 years old. From the outside, it's like, this is absolutely the exact definition of a bad situation. But it actually ends up being very positive for them.
And what's neat about this particular scene, too, is this precedes the meeting that she has with the log lady. So because she starts wondering if Margaret has ever thought about these types of fantasies in the way that she is. And that passage ends, all the positivity, and I forgot to mention this, was P.S. Donna still hasn't called me back yet.
Yeah.
So she's still, like, worried that now she's finding sort of a kinship with the log lady and feeling even more isolated from Donna.
Oh, great. Thanks for that context. I have been jumping around through the story to find the pieces that I want to talk about and put some things together. I didn't realize they were almost contemporaneous, those moments of her with Margaret and then this. That's great. One of the themes that you brought up in this scene with the three guys and that we see throughout the book is this idea of Flora trying to protect herself. So especially in the last, half, 2/3 of the book, as she learns more about Bob and as she's trying to make a plan to try to protect herself, how can she, battle him? This idea of trying to split herself into two. She has the naughty Laura and the good Laura, and that this good one, it describes in a couple different times in this way of like that Laura's asleep inside her and being held by the other half, cradled by the other half, I think she says. And we see that come out in so many different ways. I think one of the things you had mentioned before is this dream. Oh, you mentioned it because this was taken from Jennifer Lynch's own life, but this dream of the rats. She's in a room and there's a rat in the corner and she knows that it's going to attack her and she's afraid of the pain that it's going to cause. So instead she decides to bite her own foot off. I mean, that is just the theme of the entire, her self-destruction throughout. She thinks that's the way to protect this inner Laura, this innocent Laura, is to hurt herself before someone else can hurt her. This idea that if she makes herself completely rotten, then Bob isn't going to be interested in her anymore because he's only interested in the good part of her. And she just, has this guess that's what's going to happen. And
Right. Well, she talks a lot about eliminating fear too. Like, if I can do all these things and not have any fear, that he will have no interest in me.
right. But I don't think there's anything that Bob has done, and the things that he says, of course, she doesn't believe him, and we can't believe a thing that he says either. He just knows what to say to, get this response from her. But there's nothing that would indicate that if she did these things that Bob actually wouldn't be interested. Maybe that's the thing that actually is driving him. And it goes back and forth throughout the book with that. So there's the hurt herself before someone else can hurt her. She does that again with Bobby. So she has this night with Bobby. They go out to a barn. They have some weed. They have some vodka. They decide to take their time, and she, gives herself to him. Throughout this entire time, and it's this, this battle within her of, why can't I be normal? Why can't I have this love that I've been waiting for? Why couldn't it have come sooner when I could have had it? But instead, they go through all this, and Bobby confesses his love to her, his devotion, his loyalty, and she forces herself to laugh at him, which we actually get the reference to in season 1 of Twin Peaks. Dr. Jacoby mentioned this to Bobby when they have the family counseling session, but to see it from Laura's point of view, that she had to do this, and she hopes that someday he's going to understand why she needed to do this. It's just so wrenching to see, because this could have been a perfect night for her. It could have been something really special. He could have been the one for her, because he hadn't turned into the Bobby that we then later meet for the first time in the first season. So it's just, again, trying to protect herself by hurting other people, not giving herself what she really wants, hurting herself before other people can hurt her, to keep that duality. And hopefully, like she says, she can sink into the darkness and keep holding on to that light and be able to find her way back. It's, runs throughout the book. There's probably any number of other examples of those.
Yeah,
those are the ones that stand out to me.
The scene with Bobby, when she laughs and then he calls back to apologize to her.
Yes.
And then, that time she's talking about being in two halves. But what's interesting about the two halves thing, she also mentions, like, the part of her that she hates is her masculine half.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stuff about men and women, and particularly like her dealing with being bisexual and all of the shame and fear that is building within her. There's multiple times where, she's having these nightmares that her mom finds pictures of her. And like, there's the scene with Leo's party when she has that moment with the woman, even though there's people watching and everything, and she connects and they have like a sexual experience together. But then it keeps feeding into her, I'm not a good person. Like, if my mom sees this, and her dad in her dream is tormenting her about it, and all of the attraction that she has to Ronette.
Sometimes it feels right to say, other times I can't. Well, I had actually, just for that moment, thought of Ronette. Just because she was the only girl aside from Donna that I had seen naked. We were in assembly together about 2 years ago, maybe more, and we were the only 2 costume changes in the middle of the program. We changed clothes and kind of smiled at one another. I guess I was attracted to her somehow, by the way her eyes appeared sad, but cold.
Ronette is really explored in depth in this book, even more so than Donna. I mean, Donna's her best friend early, but the two of them separate, and it's really kind of Ronette and Bobby and all of the feelings that she has for Ronette and wanting to be with Ronette.
I have no idea what she thinks of me. I doubt it's wise to ask. All I need are rumors buzzing around that Ronette and I are seeing each other every chance we get. Mom would have to be sent to the Haywards, if not the hospital itself, and Dad, he'd most likely think we were talking about a new game.
In one of the hardest scenes to get through, when she is almost, killed by those guys that take her to the hotel, where she literally has to use sex to get out of that situation.
Oh my goodness,
The
yeah.
thing that drew her there was wanting to be with Ronette. So I think there's something to that, to her own sexual identity, that is feeding into a lot of this guilt and things like that. But to jump back to Bobby, because you brought about that scene with Bobby, it's you get that scene, and then you get the New Year's Eve Bobby, when they have that one final night together that's really beautiful, and they sort of know it's over, and it's about the drugs, where he thinks it's a drugs, but it's Bob, but she can't talk about the quote unquote problem that she's dealing with. And just that there's details where you talked about the craft of the book in the way that she writes Laura as just looking at the blanket, like not being able to make eye contact before she confesses that, sometimes I would choose the Coke over him,
right?
But, I would choose the Coke over anyone. And she says this line about being better company to herself because of what is happening in her life. And she's really acknowledging her isolation and speaking it out loud, and how hard that is. To derail myself, what's your thoughts on Bobby post reading this book? Did it change?
Yeah, right.
Because you were not a big fan of Bobby, and we talked
Still
about
not.
the line about and she loved me.
Yeah,
But I feel like she loves Bobby.
yeah.
Like she says that at one point, but she can't let herself love
That's right,
Bobby,
yeah.
and she's happy that he's with Shelley at one point. Although she is also driven by competition, which maybe we'll have time to touch on or not.
Totally.
But so you still don't like him. It didn't.
I don't like
worm you to him in a way, or make you give you a better understanding of him, because I feel like it really does.
That's a different question. I have a ton more empathy for him and understanding of the character and how he got to where he is.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
But it doesn't mean I like him more. He's not a guy. Well, because you have said, and tongue in cheek to some extent, but like maybe not. Maybe Bobby is as you were watching this at the time it aired, Bobby was a person to kind of emulate. He's very cool, whatever. I never saw him that way. I still don't think he'd be a great hang, but that doesn't mean I can't completely understand. And the Bobby that we see at the very beginning, not the very beginning, but in this scene or leading up to the scene, as he's so completely enamored of her. They have this wonderful night together, the first sex scene with them, and he absolutely opens himself up to her. That's a Bobby that I could have seen if, everything else wasn't going on, and they could have actually continued from that point, and she could have let herself love him. That's a Bobby that would have been a much more likable person. But understanding what she's done to him, how she turned him into the Bobby that we meet in the first episode of the series, totally understandable. She manipulated him. She loved being able to do that. She says that one of the things she loved about him is that she could ask him anytime to get some smoke, that she could get some alcohol. He would do anything. He'd show up at the drop of a hat for her. She loved having that.
He sells drugs for her.
I'm just saying even from the very beginning, she's using that part. And then it evolves into that first party at Leo's and the cocaine, and then he starts selling the drugs. So he just turns into a completely different person. So to answer your question, do I like Bobby better? No. Do I understand him and empathize with him more? 1,000%. This is beautifully drawn to see how he got from this 14-year-old Bobby, or even earlier, the Bobby pulling her pigtails, to the Bobby that we see later, who's going to, cause some real havoc.
All right, so I want to talk about the drug deal gone wrong, and how there's so many things to unpack with this particular scene. First off, is there a power failure? Or is this the darkness that is overtaking? Because this darkness comes, she talks about how no radios are reporting on it. There's no news reports. None of the other characters mention it. So is this real, or is this Bob with all of the possessions? That I found very interesting.
Do you think she knows?
I think she thinks there's no power and it's dark out and it shouldn't be.
Because she does mention it, because she mentions it a couple times, like you said, that no one else mentions it, no one else comments it on the radio. It felt a little bit. This is another theme that I didn't really flesh out, but this idea that she's not sure if she's sane or not. This not that she's an unreliable narrator to us, because I think she's telling us everything as she sees it, but she questions her own sanity. I just curious, do you feel like this is maybe another example of that, where she's like, this is unreality, this can't be, because no one's mentioning it?
No, I think she thinks it's literally dark, and it could literally be dark.
It could, yeah, we don't know.
You know, it could be a strange phenomenon. But I think, like, I don't necessarily think it's also like whether Bob's real. And she keeps
there's that
questioning that, and then reassuring herself, he is real. I know he's real. Like, but her physically, like, this is sort of the moment that she's physically entering the real darkness, because Bobby's going to shoot a guy and kill a guy at this point. So the whole thing is very tense. But what follows is they go back to the cabin, and they're doing a bunch of coke. And she's got to go to the store. And on the way to the store, she runs over that cat. And if you're like, we didn't talk about Jupiter. So her cat, Jupiter, who was a big part of her life, he's not mentioned a ton, but even when he dies, she says, I didn't mention him a ton, but he was so important to me. The fact that she is the one that kills the cat, and she has this really interesting conversation with Danielle, and Danielle looks at her even though she just lost her cat, and she's seeing mercy and love. And the fact that she's going for flesh world when she kills this thing of innocence, and as she is becoming more and more Bob-like, she starts worrying that Danielle is going to become Bob. She has that dream. It is just such a wonderful bookend for her to be the innocent girl whose cat is taken away to becoming the Bob monster. And I guess I got to talk about all the Bob stuff and her becoming Bob, because there's so much of that, being the one to take it away. And it follows the physical entering of the darkness, you know, in reality. And then she herself is now, her own vices, like reaching for flesh world, are causing this. Plus Bobby kills a guy. And maybe that's the guy that she tells James, you know, assuming that's Bobby killed a guy. Although there's another guy in Fire Walk With Me that Bobby also may or may not kill. So, you know, you do what you want with that.
I'd love to talk about your point of view and how she's turning it to Bob. But even exclusive of the Bob of it all, she is the person that she cursed as a kid for killing her cat and never even stopping to say I'm sorry. But she does do that. So there is this, like, it's not just a bookend. It's almost a way of healing that part of herself, that she ends up being the person that did the thing, but is able to also take the responsibility that person didn't do. So she doesn't hurt Danielle in the same way. But the fact that, like you said, Danielle is and Laura is the really hung up on this, is that Danielle's the one who's wronged in all of this, but she's so upset that she upset an adult, and she's trying to comfort her the entire time. It's so confusing for Laura to have to be in this position, and it's so wrenching. I love the way they position those things next to each other. But throughout the book, we do have so many references to the owls. The first of all, starting from a dream that Laura was having, and she talks about, you know, her mother found her talking in her sleep, and she was hooting, and how Laura was so embarrassed by that. And I can absolutely relate to this. I'm sure so many people can, but your most embarrassing thing that happens becomes your parents' favorite anecdote to tell their friends in front of you. Speaking for myself, the number of times that happened was like, Danny did this, and I have to be here listening to this most embarrassing thing that happened to me, getting retold for maybe the fifth or sixth time, just kills me. But it is this owl theme of her hooting, and that Laura's just mortified and hopes that no one reads this in her diary, that she even had this moment. So that's the first. It's an interesting way to introduce the owls overall. It's not by mistake, but it is something, you know, from a dream state. This owl emerges through Laura. Later in that year, Laura is in the woods. She says, the owls have started hooting. One of them is above me. Something about him is strange, and I know it's a boy owl, and he's watching me. And each time she looks up, the owl's head turns away. So we have this, you know, in the woods. As you mentioned before, what Margaret was saying to her, sometimes it's a place for people to learn about things. Sometimes it's not a place for people, but for creatures, we have the supernatural presence of these birds, this bird of prey, this bird that's also, in mythology known for being wise, but at the same time menacing. She even mentions like a story of a bird that would land on someone's shoulder and like peck their brains out or be able to hear their thoughts.
I feel like owls are also a representation of Bob and these entities, right? Because you have like the owl. Bob talks to an owl. Owl's watching her when she's has that dream about her mom with the orgy and everything. And also the note about that you had said about like the owl is a boy owl. Like that's the second time that she looks at an animal and identifies it by its penis, which again, it's the woods, it's the sexual abuse. It's all sort of mixed up in this evil sort of male that is in her life. And we can talk about, she makes mention it could be a neighbor, it could be, a salesman, but like the idea, the owls themselves are not what they seem, but they're not always good things. Like there is an association with, I saw her like hooting as like an early sign of her becoming like Bob.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
The big owl and the giant owl, and sort of you start wondering, okay, well, what is that? What is the giant owl? And that's when it's like someone took her in the woods. They did something they're not supposed to. She's not seeing this person. She's seeing an owl, a giant owl, and the connections to Bob and all of that.
I mean, it absolutely is made quite explicit later that the owls are either a means of transportation between our world and the Black Lodge, White Lodge, or I don't know if they explicitly turn into owls, but that is the connection that is absolutely seen here. But it's not just evil spirits. I think it's kind of any spirits. It's very ambiguous in that way, and I think intentionally. We have a scene, the next scene where the owls are mentioned is when Laura's trying to be brave. She goes out into the woods and she thinks if she has no fear, you've mentioned this before, if she has no fear, Bob's not going to be interested in her anymore. So she goes out to the tree where Bob usually takes her. She sees the rope on the ground, by the way.
Yeah.
Wow. But she does this and she has this whole moment of teasing him. Come out, Bob, come out and play. And the wind picks up, but she never sees Bob, but she knows that he's there or she feels that he's there. And she does, all the things to herself that Bob would have done, but she kind of puts it on display. And as she's leaving, she's on the way out of the woods. I was nearly killed as an owl swooped down out of nowhere. I could feel the power of its wings as it shot by me. I thought of the log lady, something she said, many things are not what they seem. So this moment of like, she's trying to call Bob to her. She doesn't see him, but she feels his presence, and this owl swoops down. The power of it, and almost, could have killed her at that moment, I think is really interesting scene.
I see that particular owl too as like the harbinger of what's to come, because at that moment in that scene is when she welcomes the darkness. Like she talks about welcoming the darkness, the woods, the dark woods. This is the moment that she's letting Bob in.
She says as well, she feels like she can let the darkness in and survive that better than Bob could survive the light. So she feels like she has this leeway to go ahead and succumb to that in order to fight him, and still be able to draw herself back to the light, which tragically is not going to be the case. And I guess just the very last thing, this is 1988, towards the very end, August 31st, she says, I fell to my knees and everything went silent. I looked up there and 30 feet in front of me was a gigantic owl. As I look back now, I'm still unsure, was he a friend or an enemy? Which is a question we're always going to have with them. We stood staring at each other for a long time. It felt like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. So this giant owl. But, again, I putting these pieces together, I think it is very explicit. We find out later kind of this is, or we're made to understand later that this is how the spirits are moving between worlds. But from Laura's point of view, just how all these very strong references to the owl and the imagery that it conjures, I thought was very interesting.
Jumping on that, since we were talking about it, like the welcoming the darkness in and the owl coming, like just to talk about the possession, like very early on, she's talking about, I think there's someone inside of me, and she sometimes sees her in the mirror. We have the scene that we talked about with, the old Laura being dead. She had to go off. I can only use her voice sometimes, that she's broken in two. We talked a little bit about that. That she has that dream of her dad taking off his clothes and talking about her mom saw pictures of her with women. I touched a little bit on that with her bisexuality and sort of trying to deal with that. She's just full of shame. knowing about her feelings about other women, or the way I'm reading it anyway. And it follows her first experience with a woman.
The woman finally made it up off the couch and came and kissed my chest, where the dress cut low at the neck. She wanted me to know she felt she owed me one if we ever crossed paths again. I can't understand what got into me, but I wanted it. I wanted to try.
And then these dreams come in that you're doing something wrong, you're dirty, you shouldn't have these fantasies. This is also the moment that Bob breaks through. Now, it follows the part where she's letting in the darkness, so that happened already. But now Bob starts talking in the diary, and she's not sure, was Bob here? Was Bob inside? Which, inside of herself. Much later on, then she starts seeing Jacoby, and she starts to resent him because he doesn't confirm this fear that she's becoming Bob. And she takes it to the point where she essentially rapes Harold Smith.
Not essentially, she does.
She does. I mean, but even before that, when she's sort of seeing him, the innocence of him.
Yeah.
When she talks about seeing him the way she imagined Bob saw her. And that becomes, she's becoming Bob. And then she literally goes through and does that thing. And then we have the whole business with Danielle.
That's a really interesting point about her seeing herself as, seeing Harold as Bob saw her is an interesting contrast. A thing that I didn't know that ever happened until I read this book is that, Laura had sex both with Josie Packard and with Blackie. Mm-hmm. But both of those situations were very different than this. Neither of them had the innocence, and both of those felt like she was doing it again to control or punish them, especially Blackie. She just wanted to leave her
Yeah, definitely to punish Blackie, and she's annoyed at Josie.
Exactly. It wasn't this, positive experience. And we talk about this idea of Bob being Bob being attracted to the innocence and then the pain that it's causing. We don't have the term for the...
Garmonbosia,
sorry.
I didn't even mention that. When Jupiter dies is the first appearance of creamed corn. This is also when the creamed corn comes out, it's also when she starts talking very early about her fantasies and that she cannot talk to Donna about them.
Yeah,
this part. Coupled with the death of Jupiter.
But just, the point that you're making of how she's becoming more... either becoming more like Bob, or is she becoming possessed by Bob? Tell me more what you're thinking.
Well, for me, 100%, Bob is this entity that possesses you, becomes you, walks with you, as I went over many times in all of our season 1 things. But certainly, I think Bob's ultimate goal is to take over Laura's body.
I think what's interesting is, from her point of view, as a first-person point of view, and this thing happening to her, whether she thinks he's real, whether she thinks he's not, whether she's going crazy or he actually knows these things. He couldn't possibly know the details of my dream unless he was real, which doesn't make any sense because if it's all in your head.
When you talk about the dream, you're talking about her dream of death. There's so many things.
Yes. It was her dream of death.
Where she's waiting for that seat, something she didn't tell Bobby. Mm-hmm. I see that too as the seat in the Red Room that she takes. Post-death, when she meets Cooper and she comes over and she sits down, and doesn't she look just like Laura Palmer?
Jesus, there is so much. It's not a very long book, but it is a very dense book.
So much about death. Yeah, I think of death as a companion I long to meet. She's always talk about waiting for her remains to being found, which immediately calls to mind. She's foreseeing her own death in the pilot. Talking about death, where she's talking about sex, and she's so full of guilt from putting her hand between her legs that she wants to put the other to pull the trigger. But very early on, when she's hanging out with Maddie, and Maddie uses poems. Sometimes it's good to talk about poems because then you could be yourself. And there's a number of poems in there. But when she talks about, let me just read it. He comes to take me, turn me round and round. Immediately start thinking of being wrapped in plastic, right? Because this whole particular poem is pieces of forest in my hair and clothes. Now in the pilot she's naked, but you read this thing and it's like he's coming into the window with a smile and he's basically taking me to the woods and killing me. And then I see that line as being wrapped in plastic.
Absolutely.
Meals on Wheels is great because we introduced two of my favorite characters, Mrs. Tremont, well, three of my favorite characters, Mrs. Tremont, her grandson that practices magic, and Harold Smith. I also love, I mentioned it briefly, her competitiveness. Audrey Horne, there's a competition going on between her and Ben Horne. I talked about this when we did season 1, that there was a history between them, and we find out Troy, which we didn't even mention Troy.
Yeah.
We got this far, we didn't really get into the pony and how horrible that is. That was a gift. At first she thinks it's from her father, but then it's from Ben Horne. And this drives this wedge between Audrey and Laura Palmer, and she's like, and we'll never be friends. I mean, so Ben's
sitting her on his lap and ignoring Audrey, like singing to her, like it's crazy. It's absolutely nuts.
She's also jealous of Mike and his relationship with Donna, and wishing Donna would look to her more instead of now turning to Mike, even though she's distant from Donna and doesn't really. She just constantly needs people to need her and want her.
Right.
But the thing that to lead to Meals on Wheels is the idea of Meals on Wheels is born out of jealousy, because she's looking at Shelley in the Double R, and it's Leo's wife, and Leo's another person we didn't even talk about.
Yeah.
And it's that moment that she ends up sort of putting this together. A couple of quick story things, because there's plenty of story things in here. We get an answer to your question from the last evening about the timeline with Hank. So we know that Hank killed the vagrant on Christmas Eve, 1987, and Andrew had died earlier in September of that year. So I don't know how that prevents him from, going to jail for that crime.
Nope.
But anyway, the Laura trying to stay sober and then she no longer has any friends is such a fantastic depiction of drug abuse. But it's also right at that end of that paragraph where I met my first mention of Harold Smith. So I have this new friend, Harold Smith. I don't know if you remember him from the show at all, but he's one of my favorite characters. Also, Mrs. Tremont, she's an older woman. She's fantastic. I'm sure you know her from Fire Walk with Me.
Yep.
And we talked about the attack that she does with Harold Smith.
Yeah, I mean, additionally with the Meals on Wheels, not only is it born out of the competition, but it is a series of things that she's doing to try to be good. There's the moments where she I guess she went 6 months without using cocaine. So she was trying to do these other things like spending time with Johnny Horne because he was being ignored by his family, giving Josie the English lessons at the Meals on Wheels. None of these things, and we know about them from the series, we know from the show, but they're all kind of descriptions of Laura being, she was just this wonderful pillar of the community almost. And now we actually see these are just we now find out, vain attempts to try to be good. And they weren't really born out of any strong desire on her own part to do them for themselves. It was to try to, encourage that side of her when she's already so far down the road.
In general, it's just so sad because there's so many moments of these innocent things that she likes, whether it's, if we're going to say it's the same cat, but it's not the same cat, but it looks like the same cat that she runs over. Troy, who she loves, and then in a drugged out moment of trying to help him, sets him free only to have him die.
Which is great because she sets him free because she feels like as she's becoming this dark version of herself, she's going to hurt everything around her. So she's trying to save him by getting him away. But she does the thing that actually ultimately does it is the perfect irony. It's the definition of irony. It's fantastic.
You see the same thing with Johnny Horne, how Johnny Horne is one of the only people that doesn't want something from her sexually or otherwise. But then she turns on him and she blows up at him just like she attacks Harold. And again, it's more evidence of this Bob entity or the evilness that is coming. And you could look at this and say there is no Bob. This is what happens from abuse and from drug addiction and all of these things that spiral out, all this demons. You could certainly take this book and remove any supernatural element and still find a through line.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think your point that this book should stand on its, and does stand on its own without any connection to Twin Peaks proper, is a really good one, just for that exact reason.
God, that Troy thing, and that follows the way that she wrote this, like, you got to sort of, hey, it's Laura, it's my birthday, and like, I got a pony.
I know.
P.S. Like, I hope Bob doesn't come tonight. And you're like, oh, jeez.
From the very beginning. Yep.
Stab you right in the heart. One very quick thing that I want to bring up is while she's having this dialogue with Bob, Bob says some interesting things.
Do whatever you need to do. I don't need anything. How nice for you. Now get out of my head. I want things.
Now, I made a big deal of this when we did Realization Time about Cooper, when he's with Audrey, and he has his wants and he has his needs, and he puts his needs forward. But this voice of Bob is all about want. So for anybody that's watched The Return or listened to our review, know that there is another character in The Return that is also driven by want, and how does that relate to Bob, as you will find out. I also want to talk about drug abuse. I think she does a really good job of portraying drug abuse, particularly when she's well on her way to being a coke addict. And she talks about how she has to do an entire bullet of coke just trying to deal with having a burger with Mike, Donna, and Bobby. So she goes on that like double date, and she's just so miserable. And her entire old world at this point is completely dead. And it just reminded me, I don't know if you've seen Gus Van Zant's Drugstore Cowboy.
Nobody, and I mean nobody, can talk a junkie out of use. And you can talk to them for years, but sooner or later they're gonna get a hold of something. Maybe it's not dope. Maybe it's booze. Maybe it's glue. Maybe it's gasoline. Maybe it's a gunshot in their head. But something to relieve the pressures of their everyday life, like having to tie their shoes.
Talking about why people get high, and it's like the monotony of just having a burger and sitting with these people is too much for her. First time we see cocaine too, she realizes Bob in and of itself is a warning, which is so cool. Beware of Bob.
Beware of Bob. Yep.
So cool. Oh, we gotta say Ben Horn.
P.S. I'm going to have to tell the world about Benjamin.
Right, so we have like her going to the perfume counter. We know how Emery Battis works. I love her commentary on Emery Battis. Mm-hmm. We're missing the pages that happen when she goes to One Eye Jacks, though. We find out that she's going there, so she gets the call. And that first night, those 2 pages are missing. And the next entry, she's like, I've reread the entry and how awful it is, and I can't believe I'm effing my father's employers is one of the lines. And obviously we know that her father works for Ben Horn. So that's like a huge flag. Also later on, she does the thing, I'm going to tell the world about Ben Horn. So Ben is not looking good for this. Not at all.
I will say something that is different from listening to the book than reading. I don't recall, and maybe it's because I was driving at the time, and I was very absorbed by it because her performance was incredible. I don't recall it explicitly calling out the missing pages in the audio version.
Oh, that's too bad.
And it wasn't until I came home and I started reading through the book again and came to the missing pages and saw how it was actually, laid out in the book so you could see them. Pages missing is found.
Yeah, page ripped out. There's one other thing we talked about when we talked about the log lady scene that I forgot to mention when she visits with Margaret. Margaret tells Laura that many people will love her in her life.
Yes.
Many people will love her in her life.
Yep.
Which is that moment of hope that you're going to find love from other people. But you can sort of see that she's talking about us. The way I love Laura and the way you love Laura and the people reading this diary love Laura. Because there's also another dream that Laura has where she imagines her diary being sort of appearing and disappearing on people's laps. Clearly, the fear of being exposed, this is her only safe space. But if you look at it as this poor girl that exists within this book that will find love through the viewers of the show and the readers of the book, and we'll read the diary and we'll pass it around. The way this book was ripped out of the TV and now within the book, it's coming into our world. It's just very cool.
No, it is absolutely an artifact from this reality of the television show actually put in our hands is something to be commented on in the book. I think that's absolutely right.
And I think we talked about how she creates a separate diary. This one goes to Harold Smith at the very last page, which will become a plot point in the show, season 2.
Yeah, you kind of referenced that if you were coming to this expecting the diary that we see in the show, this is not that. But she does. I do like that there's this moment later as she's like doing a ton of coke and she's all the things that she's trying to do with the Meals on Wheels and everything, and also keep up a second diary, a fictional version of the good Laura that she is protecting or smothering at the same time.
We didn't talk about her abortion and the wish that she makes for her unborn child.
I wished that whoever this child was would come back when the time is right, when there is a marriage, a union that you were born of, not responsible for. You, child, should be a gift to those who are ready, not a burden like so many others before you. Come back, child, when I am no longer a child myself.
I can't believe I forgot this. That is an incredible passage. And so having not had this situation, I can imagine this is such a relatable feeling. And to put it into words so eloquently like that is so powerful.
All right, so let's do this list. I got nothing else.
I got nothing else except I want to know who the killer is.
Thank you, Jennifer Lynch, for writing such a moving book. I greatly appreciate it.
Wait, why are you...
Okay.
To wrap that up, let's talk about this
No,
list.
we're talking about the sex list.
Yeah, sex list.
We will end this on, I guess, the only lighthearted part of this entire
This
book.
is lighthearted?
Yeah, when you see what the names are, yes.
Okay, cool.
So there's a list for those following along with their print diary. It's on page 132, in which she's going over all of her sexual experiences, and she puts the initials of everyone that's there. I don't know if you want me to read off the ones that I have,
let's just go with the ones that you have. So we got B.
B
Who's
is Bob, right?
Yep. Then we got
BB is Bobby Briggs.
Briggs. Yep.
LJ is Leo Johnson.
Sure, for sure.
RP is Ronette Pulaski.
Right.
The next one I have is JH. That is James Hurley. Now, there's a second JH. I think this is a mistake because it says, in several unseen, unknown, out by the cabin. I think it's supposed to be Jacques Renault because it's his cabin.
Yeah, I don't see a Jacques. I don't see a JR here.
Yeah. So I think the JH here is Jacques Renault. We didn't talk about Jacques Renault. And we didn't really talk about Leo. Leo has so much more depth in this book
he does.
than he does in the show. And Jacques Renault has a lot more depth. And she's almost has like a much closer relationship to Jacques Renault. But we will not get into that. We can't just... I could easily walk down this path. Now, JH could be Jerry Horn. There's no Ben Horn in here. This list is written before she says the thing about my father's employers. It's written before the One-Eye Jack things. But JH could be Jerry Horn. I don't buy it because it has the mention of the several unseen unknowns out by the cabin. The fact that Jacques and the cabin are so intertwined, to me, it feels like a mistake. JCL. You want to take a stab at who you think JCL is?
No one comes to mind.
Jennifer Chambers Lynch, the author of the book.
Oh, fantastic.
DL, that's what I mean. This is the lighthearted part. DL is David Lynch. MF is Mark Frost. HP is Harley Payton. BE is Bob Engels. DD is Dwayne Dunham. Now, there's an MR here. I think MR is Margaret Reevy, her mom. Now, she goes by Peggy Reevy, but I believe her proper name is actually Margaret Reevy. So I'm going to say that's her mom. Those are the only ones I get. I imagine a lot of these are friends.
There's an ESG on here. Yeah. No, I'm just
funny you should say that. I don't have a signed edition, but what I've heard is when she does sign the book for you, she'll put your initials on this page.
Oh, that's really... I had no idea about that. That's
one day
adorable.
maybe I will get a book signed.
I love that.
But I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Did you find any? Those are the only ones I could figure out.
No. I mean, only just the beginning ones were the ones that made sense to me, and the rest, to me, it didn't actually matter. Like, it's fun to do that, but it didn't matter to the story. It was the recounting of them in mass, the weight of that was the point for me, and being like, I don't even need to go down that road. I get where you're driving at. This is, oh my gosh.
So that's it. I don't know. I think I hit my limit here. I can't.
I bet that
I
you
got
could.
more.
If we were,
I do. I literally, like, you can't see my book. There's like 500 markers on this.
in the middle of the night, Erica's going to wake up in a cold sweat saying, I got to get back to the podcast. Here's these 12 more things that I need to talk about. But yeah, this is just a fascinating. I've been looking forward to this conversation. I've been looking forward for a long time to actually reading the book and having a reason to kind of come back to it. So to be able to put this book in context while watching the show together with you has just been incredible. I would have liked the book regardless. I don't know, would have appreciated the book regardless. But to do it in this context gives it so much more meaning. This has just been fascinating. I hope the listeners enjoy this as well. Tell us what you think about it as well.
Yeah, let us know what you think. What better way to end this than to end with Laura?
I'm so afraid that no one will believe me until after I have taken the seat that I fear has been saved for me in the darkness. Please don't hate me. I never meant to see the small hills and the fire. I never meant to see him or let him in. Please, diary, help me explain to everyone that I did not want what I have become. I did not want to have certain memories and realizations of him. I only did what any of us can do in any situation. My very best.
Thank you for listening to our discussion of The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer. I had so many more things to say. I could keep going on. But I appreciate you staying with us, and, what a powerful piece of work this was. We will return and do season number 2. So if you're watching this for the first time and you've read this diary for the first time, you are probably like I was, and you cannot wait to find out what the next mystery will be. Thank you for listening to the Meanwhile podcast with Dan Johnson and Eric Grissom. If you would like to support the Meanwhile podcast, you can leave us a donation by visiting ericgrissom.com/meanwhile and clicking on the support link. If you like our show, please consider rating and reviewing the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're hearing this now. Meanwhile is produced by Eric Grissom and Where's My Robots? The Meanwhile theme song is written and performed by Paul Finn and Evening Pines. If you want to let us know what you thought of the show, you can reach Dan at danjnj.com, both on the web and on Blue Sky. Eric can be found on Blue Sky at ericgrissom.com, which is also his website. It's also me, right? That's weird. We'll see you again, and in the meantime, be good.
Listen to the sounds.
Meanwhile.
Where's my robot? You know?